Well, we're in week 2 of our series called Too Casual. We've been looking at the characteristics, the attributes of God, and how sometimes as followers of Jesus, we can be a little bit too casual in how we approach God. And today we're in the studio with Pastor Scott, and we're talking about God's power. And Scott, you've got a few stories from Luke chapter 8 that illustrate how strong Jesus really is.
Yeah, that's right. Luke 8 is a great illustration of God's power. You know, we could just kind of give a bunch of verses pulled from different parts of the Bible that explain here's how God is all powerful, here's how he's omnipotent. But I think I love Luke 8 because it shows how Jesus, God in the flesh, God himself, it demonstrates his power. And it shows how he can be powerful through every situation we face in life.
Okay, so I'll set you up. The first story shows that it's easy to forget that God's in control. What's the story?
So the story is Jesus is on a boat with his disciples and they're going to the other side of the lake, and Jesus takes a nap. And while he's asleep, a storm breaks out, and it's such a massive storm that these guys some of whom are professional fishermen and have grown up on the lake, think they're gonna die, and they're like, Jesus, don't you care about us? And Jesus, he gets up and he rebukes the wind and the waves, and he calms the storm. And one of my favorite little just points about that is that it says that the sea went totally calm. And if you've ever been out on the ocean, or on a big lake, and you've seen a storm and then it stops, the water's not still, it's not calm, it still rolls forever, right, for a long time. And yet that's not what happened here. Jesus speaks and it all just stops. And so I think here what God's showing us is the power that he has, that he's in control of every situation. Jesus tells the disciples, where's your faith? Where's your faith? And I think, there's so many situations in life. Maybe it's like, how am I going to pay these medical bills? Maybe you feel like you've got some sort of there is some sort of catastrophe that's happened in your life. And you think like, God, do you even know what's going on? God, can you handle the situation? Yes, God is always in control.
Okay, so then as we read on in Luke 8, the second story then shows us that God is in control in the face of evil, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the next story, Jesus gets to the other side of the lake, and he encounters a man who is demon-possessed. And I know the idea of demon possession, it brings up all kinds of kooky ideas about Hollywood movies and stuff. But just for this time together, enough to say that there is this thing, a supernatural evil that we see in the Bible, that there are spiritual forces with personality that can affect humans. And we see that really going on, especially in the life of Jesus and the apostles. And so here's this man who is possessed by a demon, but not just a demon, actually. Jesus confronts this man, or this demon, and you find out that it's legion. It's many demons who are inside this man that are making him act like he's crazy, and he's isolated, he's walking around naked, he's chained to the tombs when he's in his right mind. And Jesus casts out these demons, casts out legion to a group of pigs, and they run into the water and are killed. But again, you see here Jesus' power over evil. And there's so much evil in the world that sometimes you can feel hopeless in the face of it, helpless in the face of it. And whether that's the kind of evil acts that we see happen out in the world, or even if it's just the evil of sin in our own hearts, the power of addiction, and just how that can feel like it takes over and strangles us. And there's hope that God has the power to overcome and fight even the most powerful evil inside of us.
Yeah, and then as we read on, the third story is more about personal circumstances, maybe not so much evil that's out there, but personal circumstances. Tell that story.
Yeah, so this is one of the most touching stories, and no pun intended, because what happens is Jesus is walking through this village, and this guy named Jairus comes up and he's like, Jesus, will you heal my daughter? She's dying. And as he's on his way to heal this man's daughter, this woman who, it says, had an issue of blood, she had an issue of hemorrhaging blood for, I think, 12 years, it says.
Yeah.
And she'd spent all her money trying to get better. And then there's this interesting detail in the Bible. It says that she spent all her money on doctors and she only ended up worse off. So now she's worse than she was 12 years ago, and she spent all of her money. And so Jesus is going by, she reaches out and she touches Jesus, and immediately she's healed. It says that Jesus feels power go out from him, and he stops and he turns around and he says, who touched me? And the disciples are like, this is a joke, right? Like, I mean, who touched you?
Right.
But she finally admits that she touched him, and Jesus says, because of your faith, you're healed. But also, there's not just a physical healing, but spiritual healing that goes on. And so here, for us to think about, that you see Jesus has already shown us power over creation, power over evil forces. Here, power over illness and sickness. That's what I think of, especially about personal circumstances. You know, I know some of you are dealing with long-term illness, fighting long-term issues. Maybe someone you love is, and that God is in control of the situation. God is not powerless in the situation, and that God still heals. And you know, even if healing, you know, God may heal in this life like he did for this woman, or he may not heal in this life, but there is in Christ the hope of a greater healing to come, you know?
And then and that's really what that last story is about in Luke 8. Then this one is about his ultimate power over death.
That's right. So he has this conversation with the woman, and then he goes off to help Jairus' daughter. And as they're on their way there, they find out that Jairus' daughter has actually died. And so Jesus goes into the house with a couple of his disciples and Jairus, and he says that she's not dead, she's asleep. And everyone laughs because they're like, we know what a dead body looks like, Jesus. And Jesus takes her hand and says, you know, I think, little girl, get up, rise up. And he brings her back to life. And she was dead, she really was, but Jesus brings her back to life. And so I think what an amazing picture, that the crowning miracle here is that even death can't stop God, that God has the power to raise someone from death to life. And of course, that's shown most truly in the resurrection of Christ, who dies on the cross and is raised from the dead through the power of God. But that's also just a picture that, you know, in Christ, you don't have to fear death. Like we said just a moment ago, right? Maybe you have some sort of illness and sickness that God isn't going to heal in this life. And it might take your life or take the life of someone you love. We know that there's hope for the future because there is life after death. And I just think of the words of 1 Corinthians 15, where God says, you know, death, where is your sting? Where is your victory? Death has been swallowed up through the resurrection of Christ.